for this senseless murder rests solely on the individuals who chose to engage in stealing the firearm and who chose to use it to commit those heinous crimes.
The people who committed these brutal acts of violence made a deliberate choice to use that weapon to take innocent lives. Those are not accidents, those are crimes. And the people responsible for those crimes will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
One of those guns was a Jackson Police Department SWAT rifle, short-barreled, stolen out of a marked patrol vehicle 8 weeks before the murders during a string of car break-ins at Jackson apartment complexes. The department knew it was missing. They'd entered it into a national crime database, and 2 months later prosecutors believe it ended up in the hands of the men who killed a mother, her sister, and her toddler. There's a bedroom on Queen Alexandria Lane in Jackson, Mississippi that investigators still can't talk about without pausing. Inside it, a 2-year-old boy named Camari was asleep in his own bed. Not in a hallway, not caught between two people fighting. In his bed where a baby is supposed to be safest in the whole world. That's where police found him. That's where the coroner said he'd been shot. 2 women were found in that same house. His mother, his aunt, both shot multiple times. All 3 gone in the same few minutes on a quiet Saturday night in June. And here's the detail that turned this from a tragedy into a scandal. The gun police believe did this wasn't some gun bought off the street. It was a police rifle, stolen out of a marked squad car 8 weeks before anyone pulled the trigger. And the people responsible are not new to the crime world. Let that land for a second. Welcome to Red Rage Crime TV on YouTube. And if you're watching on Facebook or Instagram, you're on Red Rage Crime TV there too. We read every single comment you leave, every theory, every question, every time you share your own story. Keep them coming. You are the reason this channel keeps digging. This is the story of Keyana Weathersby, her sister Erica, and Keyana's little boy Camari. 4 people have already been charged in their deaths, but the community still doesn't have all the answers. Stick with me, because this one doesn't leave you where it found you. Keyana Weathersby was in her late 20s. She was a mother. Her son, Camari Givens, was 2.5. Her older sister Erica was 30 and worked at St. Dominic Hospital, where co-workers would later describe her as devoted to her patients and her job. Here's what made this family different from a headline. Erica wasn't just the aunt who visited on weekends. She and Keyana were raising Camari together under one roof as a single household. 2 sisters who made a decision to build a life around this little boy side by side. Their brother, DeMarco Bailey, put it simply to reporters: kind, hard-working. 2 words he chose for 2 sisters he'd already lost too much with, because 2 years before this, Bailey had buried his wife. Now he was burying his sisters and his nephew in the same week. On the other side of this story are 4 people, charged but not convicted. Cornelius Carter, 28. Jordan Carter, 28. No relation to Cornelius despite the shared name. Mikala Young, 25, and Devin Modicure, 32. 2 of them weren't strangers to the system. Court records show Cornelius Carter was indicted back in 2015 for hitting 3 Jackson police detectives with his car. And while he was locked up on that charge, he tried to escape the Hinds County Detention Center. He was accused of burning through a plexiglass window to do it. Jordan Carter had his own record. A 2017 indictment for aggravated assault, kidnapping, and carjacking, after allegedly pistol whipping one man and carjacking another back in 2016. Devin Modicure's file went back even further: armed robbery, motor vehicle theft, a stolen firearm charge, and a 2018 case where he was accused of pointing a gun at officers during a chase. Though surveillance footage from a nearby home told a different story than the one first reported, showing him unarmed when he was shot in the back. At the time of the Weathersby killings, Modicure was already out on bond, waiting on a grand jury for separate drug and fleeing charges. Mikala Young is the outlier here. No real criminal history on paper, just this. Police have confirmed one more thing that changes how you have to read this whole case. The victims and the suspects knew each other, Chief Rachel Brackney said it herself. This wasn't random, it wasn't strangers, it was intentional. What police have not said, not once, not at any press conference, is exactly how that connection worked. And that silence is where the internet ran wild, because online, almost everyone became convinced. The real target wasn't Keyana or Erica or Camari at all. The real target, they believed, was Keyana's boyfriend, Camari's father. We'll get to what that theory means and what the family had to say about it. But first you need to understand what actually happened inside that house on June 27th, because the sequence of that night is where this case either makes sense to you, or it doesn't make sense at all. Saturday, June 27th, 2026. An ordinary night on an ordinary street in a house that belonged to two sisters and a baby they were raising together. At some point that evening, a 911 call went out from the home on Queen Alexandria Lane. The caller reported an aggravated assault. That's the official language, the kind of clinical phrase dispatch systems use before anyone on the other end knows how bad it really is. Officers were sent to the address. When they got there, whatever they expected from that call, it wasn't this. Inside, they found 3 people: Keyana, Erica, Camari. All 3 shot multiple times. All 3 gone. Here's where the forensics start to matter, because they tell you things the walls of that house can't. The Hinds County coroner, Jeremiah Howard, said all 3 victims had gunshot wounds to the head. Camari also had a wound to his right arm. The kind of detail investigators note because it can tell you about positioning, about movement, about whether someone tried to protect themselves in those final seconds. Howard didn't hide how this scene hit him. In 10 years as a coroner and deputy coroner in Hinds County, he said, this was one of the worst he'd ever walked into. Police used one word for it: publicly horrifying. And this is the piece that turns your stomach the most. Camari was found in his bed. Not in a hallway, not caught crossing a room. In his bed. Chief Brackney would later confirm that detail almost reluctantly, saying only that the toddler was in the bed at the time he was killed. Investigators say that once the full trajectory analysis and ballistics work came back from the crime lab, this did not look like a crossfire situation. It looked targeted, intentional. The capital murder charge exists specifically because prosecutors believe the killing of that child was not an accident of the chaos. It was part of the plan. Now, shell casings. If you don't know forensics, here's the short version, because it matters for what comes later. Every time a semi-automatic firearm fires, it ejects a casing, the spent brass, onto the ground near the shooter. Where those casings land, how many there are, and what kind of weapon they came from can tell investigators almost as much as a confession. In this case, family members, not even crime scene technicians, first found some of the shell casings themselves, days after the killings, near Erica's body in the bathroom. That detail alone raises a question worth sitting with. How does evidence like that get missed on an initial sweep of a homicide scene this violent? We'll come back to that. And then there's the vehicle. When investigators processed the scene, they realized something else was missing. Keyana's car, a red 2020 Mitsubishi Mirage. Someone hadn't just come into that house and left. They'd taken something with them on the way out. That car would become the first real lead in this case, and it's the thread that starts pulling this whole story toward an arrest. Because here's the thing about people who do something this violent and then panic: they leave a trail. A car has to go somewhere, a gun has to go somewhere, and somebody eventually talks. The car surfaced first. On June 28th, one day after the killings, police found Keyana's red Mitsubishi abandoned at Manhattan Park in North Jackson. Processed for evidence. That was the first thread. The second thread came from the community. Chief Brackney said it plainly: these arrests don't happen this fast without people calling in. And they did. By June 29th, 2 days after the murders, police spotted a car connected to the case on Highway 18 at Maddox Road. They tried to pull it over. The driver didn't stop. Here's where it turns into a chase, and it ends, not with a crash, but with officers boxing the vehicle in and taking 2 men into custody without further incident. Cornelius Carter, Jordan Carter. Both 28, not related, despite the name. Inside that car on the back seat were 3 guns, a 9mm and AR-style pistol, and a gold-colored handgun police still hadn't identified. All 3 went to the state crime lab for ballistics, the science that matches a fired bullet or casing back to the exact gun that fired it, down to microscopic scratches inside the barrel unique to that weapon. And here's the detail that turned this case into something bigger than a homicide investigation. One of those guns was a Jackson Police Department SWAT rifle, short-barreled, stolen out of a marked patrol vehicle 8 weeks before the murders during a string of car break-ins at Jackson apartment complexes. The department knew it was missing. They'd entered it into a national crime database. And 2 months later, prosecutors believe it ended up in the hands of the men who killed a mother, her sister, and her toddler.
New developments to a story that we've been covering all week long out of Jackson. This is a breaking news update. The gun used to kill a toddler, his mother, and his aunt is believed to have been stolen from a marked police car. That's according to Jackson's police chief.
Our Quentin Smith has been following this story all week. He joins us now with more. And Quentin, what can you tell us about this stolen gun?
Well, CJ, that stolen gun is a semi-automatic short-barreled rifle. It was a department-issued gun that belonged to a SWAT officer. Now, let me walk you through how police say we got to this point. Roughly 2 months ago, there was a series of car burglaries at different apartment complexes here in Jackson. At least 2 marked JPD cars were broken into, including the one belonging to the SWAT officer. Police Chief Rochelle Brackney says whoever broke into that cop car stole the rifle. Well, earlier this week, when police pulled over 2 of the suspects charged in the triple homicide, investigators recovered multiple weapons, including the stolen gun. The chief says an initial crime analysis shows a stolen rifle was used in Saturday's killing.
The responsibility in this case for this senseless murder rests solely on the individuals who chose to engage in stealing the firearm and who chose to use it to commit those heinous crimes.
The people who committed these brutal acts of violence made a deliberate choice to use that weapon to take innocent lives. Those are not accidents, those are crimes. And the people responsible for those crimes will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Now, that deadly shooting happened around 9 o'clock Saturday night on Queen Alexandria Lane in West Jackson. It claimed the lives of 2-year-old Camari Givens, his mother, 25-year-old Keyana Weathersby, and her sister, 30-year-old Erica Weathersby. At this time, police have not released a motive for the shooting, but Chief Brackney says the victims and the suspects knew one another. The chief also says all 3 victims were targeted, including the toddler. So far, 4 people have been arrested. 28-year-olds Cornelius Carter and Jordan Carter, who are not related, and 25-year-old Mikala Young are all charged with capital murder. Devon Modicure was arrested in Texas and will be brought back to Jackson. He will be charged with capital murder. When it comes to that stolen gun that police believe was used in this crime, Chief Brackney says the analysis from the state crime lab has not been completed. She expects to know more information on Monday. And of course, we will continue to follow this developing story for you and bring you more details as they become available. Quentin Smith, 3 on your side.
2 weeks now since that triple homicide in the city of Jackson left 3 people dead, including a 2-year-old boy. We're learning more about how the victims died. According to the Hinds County coroner, Erica Weathersby, her sister Keyana Weathersby, as well as Keyana's 2-year-old son, Camari Givens, were all shot at least once in the head. The little boy also had at least 1 gunshot wound to his right arm. Police believe the suspects used a stolen JPD SWAT officer's short barrel rifle to commit the crime. There's now evidence being presented to the crime lab to get confirmation of the gun's connection to the crime. We also understand that there were shell casings by family members that were discovered at the crime scene, which may be connected to that stolen officer's rifle, which was used in the crime. Questions about why the shell casings were left and not collected from the crime scene, and also why that officer's gun was left in their car if they were off duty at the time.
3 days after the murders came a 3rd arrest, and this one surprised people. Mikala Young, 25, no real criminal record, Police say she wasn't inside that house. She was the driver. She allegedly brought Cornelius and Jordan to Queen Alexandria Lane believing it was a robbery, and when she heard the gunshots start, she drove away. Under Mississippi law, that's enough. If you knowingly participate in a crime that turns deadly, you can be charged with capital murder even if you never fired a shot and never walked through the door. The fourth name took longer. Devin Modecure, 32, already had a criminal history stretching back over a decade: armed robbery, stolen firearms, assault on officers. By the time police wanted him, he was 400 miles away in Forney, Texas. It took a joint operation, Jackson PD, the U.S. Marshals, Texas State Police, to take him into custody on July 1st, 5 days after the killings. All four now face capital murder charges. In Mississippi, that means the death penalty is on the table. All four have been denied bond. A judge called Modecure a flight risk and a danger to the community, hard to argue given he ran to another state. Cornelius Carter also faces a felony gun charge tied to that earlier escape attempt from county jail. None of them, as of now, have entered pleas, and no trial date has been set. Online, the reaction split fast. Much of social media insisted the real target was Keyana's boyfriend Camari's father, and that when the men couldn't find him, they killed his family instead. One post read that he'd tried to lead the attackers away, and the men chose to go in like some cowards instead of confronting him directly. His sister reshared it, defending him outright. Police have never confirmed that theory. What they have confirmed is that the victims and the suspects knew each other, and that the motive, as far as investigators will say publicly, was robbery. Nothing more. The victims' family didn't spend their time online arguing theories. DeMarco Bailey, Keyana and Erica's brother, said it as plainly as anyone could. "I just need justice. Not only for my sisters, but my nephew. He's only 2.5 years old. Come on now, a 2-year-old child?" Before the arrests, before the press conferences, there were just 3 people living their lives online the way any of us do. And looking back at those posts now, they hit different. Back in December, Keyana had written about her year, calling it rough but saying she'd pulled herself back together each time it knocked her down. In April, a friend joked online about how hard she'd fight for her sister, and Keyana reshared it, laughing along, adding her own line about riding for her sisters no matter what. In March, Erica had posted a photo of the two of them together for Keyana's birthday, calling her "my little big sister" and wishing her many more. Many more. She didn't get to give her one more. Then, just 11 days before the murders, Keyana posted something almost eerie in hindsight about letting go of old friends without drama, about people going their separate ways in peace. 11 days later, she, her sister, and her son were gone. After the killings, the internet did what the internet does. It went looking for someone to blame before police said a word. Most of the noise landed on Keyana's boyfriend, Camari's father. One post insisted he'd tried to steer the danger away from his family, calling the men who came into that house cowards for going after the women and the child instead of him directly. His own sister reshared that defense, standing by her brother. But there was another post, aimed at the fourth suspect, Devin Modecure, that cut even deeper because if the rumors are true, he wasn't a stranger. He was allegedly close, maybe even a childhood friend of someone in that family's circle. One commenter didn't hold back, asking how someone could betray people that close to him. Modecure's own family pushed back hard, insisting he had nothing to do with any of it. Here's what's real and not speculation. The family held one funeral for 3 people. Keyana, Erica, and Camari laid to rest the same day, the same hour at West Haven Memorial. Their brother DeMarco stood in front of cameras more than once, grieving 2 sisters and a nephew while still processing the loss of his own wife 2 years earlier. When asked what he'd say to the people responsible, he didn't waste words on anger. He asked simply for justice, full extent of the law, nothing less.
The music filled the room. Voices lifted in worship. And for one afternoon, grief gave way to celebration.
Amen.
Dozens gathered at the West Haven Memorial in Hazelhurst to remember the lives of Erica Weathersby, her sister Keyana, and Keyana's 2-year-old son, Camari Givens. Family members shared stories of love, laughter, and of the unbreakable bond between two sisters who were raising Camari together. DeMarco Bailey is Erica and Keyana's older brother.
And Erica, she worked for St. Dominic. And I had the people reach out to me telling about how great of a person she was, how committed she was to her job and taking care of the patients. And Keyana left my baby sister there. She was just outgoing, like, bro, I got you.
And then there was Camari, the youngest life lost, remembered as a happy little boy whose laughter filled every room. What does justice look like to you?
Just let God do his thing. Just to be served to the full extent, to the full maximum extent.
Bailey has experienced heartbreaking loss before. 2 years ago, he buried his wife. Now, he's saying goodbye to his two sisters and the little boy who should still be running through the house.
I mean, wife passing was a heartbreak. It's a heartbreak. This situation right here is more like, took it. Like, come here, give me that.
Bailey says the road ahead won't be easy, but he says giving up justice for his sisters and nephew isn't an option as he waits for that justice. Is there anything that you would say to the accused?
May God be with you.
But now I see, God.
Here's where I sit with this, and where maybe you will too. Police say the target was known to the victims, and the motive was robbery. But a robbery doesn't usually end with 4 people going in, 3 people dead, and a toddler shot in his own bed. Robberies are built around avoiding exactly that kind of attention. So ask yourself if this really started as a robbery. What happened inside that house that turned it into an execution? Then there's the gun, stolen from a marked police vehicle 2 months earlier, and somehow it ends up in the hands of the men accused of this. That's not just bad luck. That's a chain of custody failure with a body count attached. The department has said the officer involved faces internal discipline, but no amount of policy change puts 3 people back in that house. And then the shell casings found by family members, not investigators, days after the scene was supposedly processed. In a crime scene this violent, how does physical evidence like that get left behind? Does it change anything about the case against these 4? Or does it just tell us something uncomfortable about how fast and how overwhelmed these investigations can be? I don't have those answers. Neither does anyone outside that courtroom yet. If you were on the jury, would this evidence, the stolen rifle, the shell casings, the getaway driver's own words to police convince you beyond reasonable doubt? Drop your verdict in the comments. And here's my question for you. Does Mikala Young's decision to drive away the moment she heard gunfire change how responsible she is or under the law? Does intent alone already make her just as guilty? Why or why not? Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the trial. This is Red Rage Crime TV.
Go to this story. We are going to switch to a press conference that's happening in downtown Jackson right now. We have
Jackson.
Chief Rochelle Brackney is speaking.
Shall, Brackney B as in boy, Rackney. To my left,
Obie Wells Jr., Captain Major Investigations. It's spelled O-B-I-E. Last name is Wells, W-E-L-L-S, and I'm a junior.
Sakrina Banks, Deputy Chief of Major Investigation. Sakrina, S-E-Q-U-E-R-N-A, Banks, B-A-N-K-S.
Detective James Jackson, Robert Homicide, T-E-R-R-E-N-C-E, Jackson County Southern.
And I am TFO Blanford, L-A-N-F-R-D. Brian, the first name, from FBI Violent Crime Task Force.
So on June 27, 2026, officers with the Jackson Police Department responded to a resident in the 300 block of Queen Alexandria Drive following reports of an aggravated assault. When we arrived, the officers located 3 deceased victims inside the house. The victims have been identified as Keyana Weathersby, her 2-year-old son, Camari Givens, and Keyana's sister, Erica Weathersby. During the initial investigation, detectives learned that the victim's vehicle, a red Mitsubishi Mirage, had also been taken from the residence. The vehicle was recovered over the weekend and is currently being processed with the assistance of the FBI as our investigators continue to collect and analyze evidence. As the investigation progressed, detectives received and followed up on numerous tips from the public. Earlier today, information was developed during the investigation that led the detectives to identify a vehicle that we believe to be connected with the homicide. Officers attempted to conduct a traffic stop at 18th and Maddox Road. However, the driver refused to stop. Officers were ultimately able to safely surround the vehicle and take 2 suspects into custody without further incident. Currently, as a result, Cornelius Carter, C-A-R-T-E-R, 28 years old, has been charged with capital murder and a convicted felon not to be in possession of a firearm. Jordan Carter, 28, no relation, has been charged with capital murder in this case as well. This has been an extensive investigation involving countless hours of work by the Jackson Police Department, their detectives, patrol, crime scene personnel, and our law enforcement partners. Investigators worked diligently to collect physical evidence, conduct numerous interviews, and analyze digital and forensic evidence as a result to develop the probable cause that led to today's arrest. This investigation is ongoing and remains active. The Jackson Police Department extends its deepest condolences to the family and the loved ones of the victims. We remain committed to seeking justice for the victims and appreciate the cooperation and support provided by the community throughout this investigation. The mayor and I would also like to thank our law enforcement partners, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, the U.S. Marshal's Office, and all of the other agencies and personnel who assisted throughout this investigation. I also want to recognize the outstanding work of our Detective Bureau, led by Detective Jackson in this case, Deputy Chief Banks, Captain Wells, and TFO Blanford, and our intelligence team and the intelligence unit and their team. They did work throughout the weekend, countless hours to follow up these leads. But we are also saying that in spite of this, our commitment is we are still determined to continue to work on bringing everyone to justice who is involved in this heinous crime. So we are asking anyone with additional information related to this case, you're encouraged as always to contact the Jackson Police Department at 601-960-1800 or our Crime Stoppers. Although arrests have been made, investigations must continue, and we will follow up on any additional leads in this case. At this point in time, we will take your questions that will be answered either by anyone on our team or by the lead detective here in this case.
Second question, do we know what caused these guys to make this senseless act?
So as we know, it's an ongoing investigation, but this was an intentional targeted act to include the killing of the child. And so, which is why the capital murder charge does exist. We also would not want to speculate on any motives to jeopardize this case.
And also, do we know if, you said it was targeted, but if they were related, if they just knew them, by the way, we know they were targeted, you know why they were targeted, if they knew them, basically.
This is, like I said, it's an ongoing investigation right now, and to how to jeopardize the case, we need information outside of that.
Chief Bradley, are there other suspects involved besides the 2 you mentioned?
So we are going to continue to investigate to develop any further leads in the event that there are additional persons that are of interest that we will bring them to this case. And again, when we say targeted, we want the public to know that this wasn't a random act, that someone just went past the house or these were persons who may not have had a connection. It was an intentional attack at this home.
Chief, what do you say to these grieving families?
You know, as we say, and as we said that night, this is senseless. This was a heinous crime committed by vile individuals who really deserve the utmost punishment in these cases. What we can say to the victims is this. We've brought in peer support for our officers, for any of the first responders, and we are also offering that trauma and support to the families in the community who are impacted by these. It just doesn't stop with the family. It's the extended city of Jackson who is mourning. And we've heard from the nation regarding this crime and the impact that it's had across the nation when a child is senselessly targeted in this case as well.
Are there any efforts to help combat crimes like these?
So we're always doing our efforts to combat crime. We work closely with our task force officers in the FBI. Although Detective Blanford is a JPD officer, he's assigned as a task force officer. We are developing stronger relationships, and that's how we're able to solve these crimes faster. But what we also know, too, that violent crime and targeted crime, we can disrupt those, but we have to get in front of them, and it does take the community to help us with this as well.
And Chief, real quick, you may have already said this, but with the two guys you guys arrested, did they find any weapons on them or anything else relating to that may cause the shooting with?
On the initial stop, we did recover a 9mm assault rifle, AR, pistol, and another handgun, unknown handgun, gold in color.
And was this inside the vehicle?
All three was inside the vehicle, on the back seat, located on the back seat.
And could that be obviously connected to the shooting?
So we will attempt to identify that. That has to go underneath our ballistic investigations as well, so that we make sure that we have all of the forensic evidence first before we make it come to any conclusions about that. Those weapons will be processed both through our forensic labs and through our ATF.
Is there any final message, Chief, you want to give out to the public about these two arrests, by the way?
So as we have said every time I've stood before you when it comes to these type of crimes, we will solve them. We will find you. We will continue to make arrests in these cases. So although you may think initially that you got away with a crime, it doesn't stop just because you left the scene. We will continue to investigate each and every crime, because every victim in the city of Jackson deserves authentic justice and not lip service from us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
This Jackson Police Chief Rochelle Brackney tonight revealing 2 arrests in the triple homicide on Queen Alexandria Lane. Troy, we know tonight 2 men now charged with capital murder.
That's right. 28-year-old Cornelius Carter has been charged with capital murder. 26-year-old Jordan Carter has also been charged. The chief says the 2 men are not related. It's early in the investigation, but Brackney says this appears to be a targeted crime, including the infant child. You can know that 16 WAPT is your breaking news leader. Make sure that you have the 16 WAPT mobile app downloaded. We'll send you push alerts as we learn more about this story.